She said, "Pretend you're mine, just for tonight." And I said yes before my brain had finished processing the sentence, which is how I ended up with my hand resting against Isla Faraday's back at her cousin's wedding, telling her entire extended family I was her boyfriend of 8 months, a title I had technically held for 90 seconds. What I did not see coming was the second sentence. Not that night. The second sentence arrived the next morning, over 2 plates of slightly burnt scrambled eggs, when Isla looked at me across her kitchen island, still wrapped in my flannel shirt from the night before, and asked, calm as a woman asking about the weather, "So, what are we?" I did not have an answer ready. I'd had a fake answer ready for 12 hours. I did not have a real one. My name is Jonah Cross. I was 30 years old, a landscape architect who spent most of his professional life convincing wealthy clients that native grasses looked better than imported roses, and I had been in love with my best friend for 2 years, for months. And, if you wanted precision, and I did, because precision was the only thing keeping me sane around her, about 11 days, though by the time this story properly ends, that number will have grown considerably larger, and I promise you, I will still be counting. Isla was 29, a physical therapist with a laugh like a dropped glass, dark auburn hair she never fully tamed, and a habit of solving everyone else's problems so efficiently that she forgot to notice she had any of her own. We lived 2 floors apart in the same converted mill building on the edge of downtown. We shared a laundry room, an addiction to terrible reality television, and a friendship so easy it had somehow convinced both of us, for 2 straight years, that neither of us wanted more. That was a lie, obviously. Best friendships built on convenient lies always are. I want to tell you how we got to that kitchen island, because it didn't happen the way you'd expect. It didn't happen at a bar, or a party, or some slow-motion moment where the music swells and everyone in the room goes quiet. It happened because Isla's cousin Naomi was getting married in the mountains outside the city, and Isla's ex-fiancé, a man named Derek Voss, had somehow ended up on the guest list because he was, infuriatingly, still close friends with Naomi's husband-to-be. Isla found out 3 days before the wedding. She called me at 9 at night. No greeting, no warm-up, straight into it. "He's going to be there," she said. "Derek. At Naomi's wedding." My mother told me like it was a weather update. I was sitting on my couch eating cereal for dinner, which tells you everything you need to know about my life at the time. "Okay," I said carefully. "How do you feel about that?" "I feel like driving my car into a lake," she said. Not dramatically, just calmly, like a woman parking. "That's not calm, Isla. That's the opposite of calm." "I'm aware." A pause, then quieter. "I don't want to walk in there alone and have him watch me be alone. He'll do that thing where he looks sorry for me. I cannot survive being looked at sorry for by Derek Voss in a rented tuxedo." I understood this more than she probably realized. Derek had been the reason Islam moved into the mill building in the first place, 2 years and 4 months ago, back when she showed up at my door at midnight with 2 suitcases and a face that had clearly been crying for hours, asking if she could crash on my couch for a week while she found a new apartment. The week became 2 weeks. The 2 weeks became the empty unit 2 floors up suddenly, conveniently available. I never asked exactly what Derek did. I knew enough. I knew he was the kind of man who called canceling her continuing education courses unrealistic to her face during an argument about her working late. I knew she used to flinch when a phone rang after 10 at night. I knew that by the time she moved out, she'd stopped believing she was allowed to take up space in her own relationship, and it had taken a solid year of me showing up with tacos and bad puns to get some of that space back. So when Isla said Derek Voss's name like it was a diagnosis, I understood exactly what was at stake. "I could go with you," I said, fast, before I could think better of it. As, like, moral support. "I'll wear the good shoes. I'll even dance if there's an open bar involved." There was a long pause on the line, long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Isla, I was thinking something slightly more elaborate than moral support," she said slowly. "How elaborate are we talking?" "Pretend you're mine," she said. "Just for the night. My date. My boyfriend, if anyone asks, which they will, because my mother has never once in her life let a silence go unfilled. I need him to see that I'm not sitting in a corner missing him. I need one night where I'm not the sad ex-fiancé everyone whispers about at the dessert table. I should have made a joke. That was our language, jokes, deflection, the whole architecture of a friendship built specifically to avoid saying anything that mattered too much out loud. Instead, I said, yes, fast and plain, the way you'd answer if someone asked whether you wanted to keep breathing. Yes? She sounded surprised, like she'd expected to have to talk me into it. Yes, Isla. I'll pretend to be your boyfriend for one wedding. I've done harder things for worse reasons. This is a big ask, she said. You'll have to hold my hand. Possibly kiss my cheek in front of my Aunt Priya, who cannot be trusted with information. I have held your hand approximately 400 times in the last 2 years, watching horror movies you insisted you weren't scared of. That's different, is it? Another pause, this one heavier, like the silence itself was doing math. I'll pick out a tie for you, she said finally, her voice a little too bright. Something that says devoted, low maintenance, slightly boring boyfriend. Wow. Thank you. You're welcome. It's a compliment in this economy. That was Isla. She could hand you an insult wrapped so carefully in affection you'd walk away feeling flattered before you fully registered what had happened. I hung up the phone that night and sat very still on my couch for a long time, cereal gone soggy in the bowl, doing the kind of math a man does when he's loved someone for 2 years and 4 months and has just been handed, however temporarily, however fake, the one thing he actually wanted. The wedding was that Saturday, at a restored barn venue an hour outside the city, all exposed beams and string lights and a view of the ridgeline that made the whole thing look like it belonged in a magazine. I picked Isla up at 11 in the morning, even though the ceremony wasn't until 4, because she said she needed emotional support for hair and makeup, which really meant she needed someone to sit on her bathroom counter and hand her bobby pins while she talked herself out of a panic spiral in the mirror. Tell me the plan again, she said, holding a curling iron like a weapon. We arrive together. I open your car door. We hold hands walking in. I meet your parents, who I've technically already met 400 times as your neighbor, except now I meet them as your boyfriend, which apparently requires a different face. A warmer face, she said. Neighbor face is polite. Boyfriend face is besotted. Besotted. Try to look besotted, Jonah. I believe in you. I looked at her reflection in the mirror instead of answering, because the truth was I didn't think besotted was going to be the hard part. The hard part was going to be pretending it was pretend. What about Derek? I asked. What's the plan there? Her hand stilled on the curling iron for just a second. We don't approach him. If he approaches us, you put your arm around my waist and say something charming and slightly territorial, and I look extremely happy, and we move on with our lives. Territorial. Got it. Do I get to be rude to him? God, no. Rude gives him a story. Happy gives him nothing. Happy is the only thing that actually wins. I filed that away, the specific wisdom of a woman who had learned the hard way exactly how to survive a room with her ex-fiancé in it. I wanted, badly, to ask her more, to ask what exactly Derek had done that she'd never fully told me, to ask if she was actually okay, to ask if this whole plan was less about looking happy and more about needing someone in her corner who wouldn't flinch. But Isla had a way of shutting doors gently when a conversation got too close to something she wasn't ready to open, and I had learned, over 2 years and 4 months, to respect those doors even when I wanted to knock harder. By 3:30, Isla came out of her bedroom in a deep emerald dress that made her hair look like it was on fire in the best possible way, and I forgot, briefly, how to form words, which was becoming an alarming pattern around her lately. Too much? She asked, smoothing the fabric at her hip. You look like you're about to ruin somebody's entire year, I said honestly. Her mouth curved. Good. That's the goal. I wore the tie she'd picked, dark navy with a subtle pattern she swore made me look reliable but interesting, which is a very narrow window, Jonah, so don't waste it. We drove out to the venue with the windows cracked and the radio low, and somewhere around mile marker 12, Isla reached over without looking and laced her fingers through mine on the console. Practicing, she said. Just practicing. My heart did something structurally unwise. I did not mention it. The barn venue was already half full when we arrived. Guests in pastel dresses and rented suits milling under string lights that hadn't been switched on yet, waiting for the sun to finish its slow collapse behind the mountains. Isla's mother, a compact woman named Renata Faraday with the same auburn hair gone silver at the temples, spotted us before we'd even made it past the gravel lot. "There she is," Renata called, already moving toward us with the kind of speed that suggested she'd been watching the entrance for 20 minutes. "And you brought—" She stopped, looked at our joined hands, looked at me, and her whole face rearranged itself into delighted disbelief. "Jonah? Jonah Cross. You brought Jonah?" "Hi, Renata," I said, and found myself smiling despite the nerves currently doing gymnastics in my stomach. "You too are." Renata looked between us, practically vibrating. "Since when?" Isla squeezed my hand, a silent signal I somehow understood immediately. "A while now," she said, vague and warm. We didn't want to make a whole announcement out of it. "A while," Renata repeated, delighted, already turning to shout something over her shoulder that involved the word finally. "Your father is going to lose his mind. He always said you two would figure it out eventually." I raised an eyebrow at Isla. She refused to look at me, suddenly very interested in a loose thread on her clutch. "Your dad predicted this?" I murmured as Renata swept off toward the barn to spread the news. "My whole family predicted this," Isla muttered. "It's extremely embarrassing for both of us." "Is it embarrassing? Or is it accurate?" She finally looked at me then, something flickering behind her eyes too fast to name. "Don't get smug, Cross. We had a deal." "I'm not smug. I'm informed." "Same thing, on you." We made our way toward the ceremony seating, Isla's hand still in mine, and I spent the next hour trying very hard not to notice how natural it felt, how her thumb kept moving in slow, absent circles against my knuckles, how she leaned her head briefly against my shoulder during the vows, and how I would have stood in that exact spot for the rest of my natural life if it meant she'd keep doing that. Naomi's wedding was, by every account, lovely. The bride cried. The groom dropped the ring and then made a joke about it that got the whole barn laughing. The officiant read something about how love wasn't a single leap but 1,000 small choices, and I felt Isla go very still beside me at that line, her fingers tightening slightly around mine, and I wondered, not for the first time, what exactly she was thinking about when she went quiet like that. Derek showed up at the reception, not the ceremony, which gave us at least a small mercy of time to settle in before the real test began. I spotted him before Isla did. Tall, sandy-haired, wearing the kind of expensive-looking suit designed specifically to remind everyone in the room how much it cost. He had the easy, confident walk of a man who had never once in his life doubted whether he belonged in a room. I felt Isla's hand find mine under the table before she'd even said his name. "He's here," she said quietly. "I see him." "Jonah, I've got you," I said, and meant it more than I had ever meant anything in my life. "Whatever you need." Territorial arm, charming distraction, dramatic fake phone call pulling us away. Name it. That got a small, real laugh out of her, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "Just stay close," she said. "That's all I need. Just stay close." So I did. I kept my hand at the small of her back through cocktail hour, introduced myself as her boyfriend to a rotating cast of aunts and second cousins with an ease that honestly frightened me a little, laughed at jokes that weren't especially funny, and watched Isla bloom under the attention in a way that made something in my chest ache with how much I wanted this to be real. Derek approached us near the dessert table, exactly the way Isla had predicted, holding a glass of champagne he didn't seem to actually be drinking. "Isla," he said, his voice smooth, performing warmth for an audience that wasn't really watching. "You look incredible." "Derek." Her voice was pleasant, cool, controlled in a way I recognized as effort rather than ease. "This is Jonah, my boyfriend." Derek's gaze flicked to me, assessing, The kind of look men give each other when they're deciding how much of a threat to register. Jonah, he repeated, extending a hand. Good to meet you, man. I shook it, kept my expression easy, my arms settling around Isla's waist in a motion that felt less like performance and more like instinct. Likewise, I said, Isla mentions you sometimes. It was a small lie, dressed up as a compliment, designed to sound like nothing while landing exactly where I wanted it to. Derek's easy smile flickered for half a second, just enough for me to see it. All good things, I hope, he said, recovering. She mentions you exist, I said pleasantly. That's about the extent of it. Isla made a small choked sound beside me that might have been a laugh disguised as a cough. Derek's jaw tightened, just slightly, and something about watching that happen felt so satisfying I nearly forgot the entire thing was supposed to be a favor and not, in fact, the best part of my entire week. Well, Derek said, recovering his composure with visible effort, it's good to see you happy, Isla. Genuinely. I am happy, Isla said, and there was something in the way she said it, some small defiant certainty, that made me look at her instead of him. Genuinely. Derek excused himself a moment later, muttering something about finding the groom, and the second he was out of earshot, Isla exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 8 months. You okay? I asked, turning to face her fully. She stopped, looked up at me, something unguarded moving across her face. I'm actually okay. That's the weird part. I thought I'd feel good at seeing him. I mostly just feel like I dodged something. You did dodge something, I said. You dodged a guy who calls your career unrealistic and makes you flinch at phone calls. Her eyes widened slightly. I never told you that. You didn't have to. I did laundry across the hall for a year, Isla. I heard things. Something complicated moved across her face. Embarrassment, maybe, or a kind of raw gratitude she didn't quite know how to hold. I'm sorry you heard things. Don't be sorry. I'm glad I was there. I'd be there again. She studied me for a long moment, the string lights finally flickering on above us as the sky went the color of a healing bruise, purple and gold at the edges. You're very good at this, she said quietly. The pretend boyfriend thing. I've had a lot of practice imagining it, I said, before I could stop myself. The words hung there between us, too honest, too soon, too much. Isla's breath caught, visibly, and for one terrifying second I thought I'd broken something we couldn't fix. Then the band struck up the first slow song of the night, and her mother appeared out of nowhere, beaming, insisting we dance, and the moment slid sideways into something else entirely. We danced. Of course we danced. What else was there to do with a sentence like that sitting unclaimed in the air between us? Isla's hand settled against my chest. My hand found the small of her back, and we moved slow and easy under lights strung between old barn beams while a stranger sang something soft about staying. You didn't answer, she said quietly, her forehead near my shoulder. Answer what? You said you'd had a lot of practice imagining it. Her voice was careful, like she was handling something breakable. Imagining what exactly? I looked down at her, at the dark auburn hair catching gold in the string lights, at the face I had watched cry and laugh and fall asleep on my couch during bad movies for 2 years and 4 months, and I thought about lying. I thought about the easy joke, the deflection, the safe exit our friendship had always offered. I didn't take it. This, I said simply. You. Us. Actually being us, instead of just pretending for one night, because your ex showed up in a suit that cost more than my truck. Isla stopped moving. Just for a second, just enough that a couple dancing beside us nearly collided into our stillness. Jonah, she said. You don't have to say anything, I said quickly, panic climbing my throat. I know this isn't the deal. I know you asked for one thing, and I'm about to make it weird, and I'm sorry. I've wanted to tell you for a while, and tonight sort of dragged it out of me. Jonah. Her hand tightened against my chest. Stop talking for 1 second. I stopped. She looked up at me, and whatever had been guarded in her expression all evening was gone now, replaced with something so open it nearly undid me on the spot. I asked you to pretend because I was scared, she said. Not of Derek. Of this, of how easy it was going to be to stand next to you and let everyone believe it, because some small, stupid, hopeful part of me has wanted people to believe it for a very long time. My chest did something I did not have a technical term for. How long? Don't make me do math in public, Jonah. I'm an architect. I love math. You're a landscape architect. You love dirt and native grasses. Isla. She exhaled, a small helpless laugh escaping with it. Since the night I showed up at your door with 2 suitcases and you didn't ask a single question. You just made up the couch and put on the worst movie you owned because you said crying was easier with something to laugh at afterward. That was 2 years ago. I'm aware, she said. I told you, math in public. Don't rush me. I pulled her a little closer, our slow dance barely moving now, more like 2 people standing very still and finally looking directly at each other after a long time spent looking sideways. So we've both been doing this for 2 years. Apparently, that's a lot of wasted laundry room small talk. Don't ruin the moment with logistics. I laughed, and something in my chest finally settled, like a board sliding into place after being warped for years. Can I kiss you? I asked. For real this time, not for Priya's benefit. Isla's eyes went soft, her hand sliding up from my chest to rest against the side of my neck. You'd better, she said. I did not curl my hair for nothing. I kissed her under the string lights while Naomi and her new husband danced somewhere to our left, and half of Isla's extended family pretended not to watch. And it was, without exaggeration, the single best decision I had made in 30 years of occasionally questionable decisions. When we broke apart, she stayed close, forehead nearly touching mine. So, she said, a little breathless. Still pretending? Not for a while now, apparently. Her smile was slow and dangerous and entirely unguarded. Good, she said, because I don't think I could survive doing this, and then going back to being just neighbors. We were never just neighbors. No, she agreed. I don't think we were. The reception rolled on around us. Cake, toasts, a bouquet toss that Isla dodged with the reflexes of a woman who had survived enough family weddings to know exactly where the danger zones were. And through all of it, we didn't let go of each other's hands. Renata cried actual tears at one point, grabbing my arm and telling me, with alarming sincerity, that she'd known since I helped Isla carry a couch up 3 flights of stairs 2 years ago that I was the one. Obviously, anyone with eyes could see it. Isla's father shook my hand twice, the second time with a grip that suggested some kind of unspoken warning wrapped inside congratulations, the universal language of fathers everywhere. By the time the band packed up and the last of the guests trickled toward the gravel parking lot, a light rain had started, soft and warm, the kind that smelled like the whole mountain exhaling after a long day. Isla's heels were in her hand, her dress hem damp, her hair coming loose from its careful pins, and she looked, standing there under the barn's outdoor lights with rain in her lashes, like every good thing I had spent 2 years pretending I didn't want. We shouldn't drive back tonight, she said, checking her phone. It's supposed to get worse. Naomi said there are extra rooms at the inn up the road, for family. Are we family? We're apparently engaged in the eyes of my Aunt Priya, so I think we qualify. I laughed, pulling her closer against the rain. Lead the way, fiancé. Don't push it, cross. The inn was small and old-fashioned, all creaking floorboards and quilted bedspreads, and the woman at the front desk, clearly used to overflow wedding guests, handed us a single key without asking a single question, assuming, correctly and incorrectly all at once, that we needed only one room. Isla looked at the key, looked at me, and something nervous and hopeful passed over her face. I can take the chair, I offered. There's a chair. I saw a chair. Jonah. Or the floor. Floors are underrated. Jonah. She stepped closer, rain still clinging to her shoulders, and took the key gently from my hand. I just kissed you in front of my entire extended family and cried a little afterward out of sheer relief that you kissed me back. I think we're past the floor negotiation. Just checking, I said. I like to be thorough. You're annoyingly thorough. It's part of your charm. We went up to the small room together, and it did not contrary to what a lesser story might promise you, turn into some dramatic cinematic collapse into the bed the second the door closed. It turned into something quieter than that, and somehow bigger. We sat on the edge of the mattress, still half-dressed in wedding clothes, and talked. Actually talked, for the first time without the safety net of jokes to hide behind. About Derek, about the year she'd spent unlearning what he'd taught her to believe about herself, about my last relationship and the quiet, unspectacular way it had ended 2 years ago. Right around the time Isla showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and inadvertently rearranged the entire architecture of my life. I used to think safe meant boring. I admitted, my tie long since discarded on the floor, her heels abandoned by the door. My ex used to say that I was safe, like it was a mild insult. Isla, curled against my side with her head on my shoulder, went very still. Derek used to say something similar, that I was too careful, too much of a planner. Like caring about things correctly was a character flaw. For the record, I said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, I think safe is underrated. I think careful is underrated. I've spent 2 years watching you be careful with everyone except yourself, and it's the least boring thing I've ever witnessed. She tilted her face up to look at me, eyes glassy in the low lamplight. You're going to make me cry again, and I already ruined my mascara once tonight. I'll take the credit either way. She laughed, wet and real, and kissed me again, slower this time. No barn full of family watching, no performance left to give. When we finally lay down, tangled together on top of the quilt because neither of us had the energy to properly get ready for bed, she fit against me like something that had simply been waiting for the right amount of time to pass. Jonah, she murmured, half asleep, her hand resting flat over my heart the way it had during our first dance. Yeah, thank you for pretending. Anytime, I said, although I'd like to formally announce that I stopped pretending somewhere around the second slow song. Noted, she whispered, smiling against my shoulder. For the record, I fell asleep that night with rain against the window and Isla Faraday breathing steady against my chest. And I want to tell you, I woke up the next morning with total clarity, total confidence, ready to answer any question she could possibly ask me. That would be a lie. What actually happened was I woke up to sunlight cutting gold across the quilt, Isla already awake beside me, propped on one elbow, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Morning, I said, voice rough with sleep. Morning, she said, and there was something careful in it now, some of the openness from the night before folding itself back up. I made eggs. Well, Ian made eggs. I retrieved them from a breakfast cart in the hallway like a raccoon. Efficient. I try. We ate at the small table by the window, sunlight bright on the mountains outside, both of us still in yesterday's clothes. Hair a disaster, and it should have felt awkward. The morning after, the daylight version of a night that had felt like it belonged to some separate, softer world. It didn't feel awkward. It felt terrifyingly, wonderfully normal, which was somehow worse, because normal meant this mattered, meant there was something real now that could actually be lost. Isla set her fork down. She looked at her plate for a long moment, then up at me, and asked the question I'd been half expecting and half dreading since the moment I opened my eyes. So, she said, calm, steady, the same voice she used when she was one sentence away from falling apart. What are we? I want to be honest with you. I did not have a perfect answer prepared. I had spent 2 years and 4 months rehearsing exactly 0 words for this exact moment, because some cowardly, self-protective part of me had never actually believed I'd get to have it. I don't want this to be a wedding thing, I said slowly, feeling my way through it. I don't want this to be a Rain thing, or a Derek thing, or a your Aunt Priya put us on the spot thing. I want it to be a Tuesday thing, a random Wednesday laundry room thing. I want to be able to knock on your door at 9 p.m. because I'm out of cereal, and have that still mean something, even without a barn and string lights involved. Isla's eyes had gone bright again, that same glassy shine from the night before. That's a very specific list of criteria. I've had 2 years to think about it. You keep saying that like it's supposed to make me less nervous. Is it working? A little, she admitted, a small smile breaking through despite herself. Jonah, I need you to actually answer the question. Words. Use words. I reached across the small table and took her hand, the same hand I'd held in the car 12 hours ago, back when we were still pretending, back when the whole thing had still technically been a favor between friends. I want to be your boyfriend, I said. For real. Not for one night. Not for Priya. Not for Derek's benefit. I want the actual version. Bad days included. I want to keep doing what we did last night, except without the part where I have to introduce myself to your extended family as something I haven't officially earned yet. Isla was quiet for a long moment, her thumb moving slowly over my knuckles, and I watched something settle in her face, some old, careful armor finally, fully coming down. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Okay, as in yes. As in, I would like that. As in, I have wanted that for approximately 2 years, and I am extremely relieved we are finally being adults about it over slightly cold eggs in a mountain inn. I laughed, relief crashing through me so hard I nearly knocked over my orange juice. That's the least romantic way anyone has ever agreed to date me. I contain multitudes, she said, echoing the exact kind of thing she'd say when she was trying to sound casual about something enormous. Also, I would like it on the record that I asked first. Last night, the pretend thing. That was still my idea. Duly noted. I'll be sure to tell our future children that their mother initiated our relationship through elaborate wedding-based deception. It wasn't deception, she said, standing up, circling the table, settling herself directly into my lap in a move that startled a laugh out of both of us. It was a very efficient shortcut. Efficient, I repeated, wrapping my arms around her. I'm a physical therapist. I believe in efficient recovery times. She kissed me then, unhurried, sunlight warm across both of us, and it tasted like coffee and eggs and something that felt, for the first time in 2 years, entirely, permanently real. We drove back to the city late that morning, windows down, radio up, Isla's hand resting on my knee the entire way instead of just practicing on the console. When we pulled into the mill building's parking lot, she looked over at me with the kind of soft, unguarded happiness I had spent 2 years hoping to be the reason for. Same floor plan, she said, nodding up toward our building. 2 floors apart. We're going to have the easiest long-distance relationship in human history. I could move, I offered. Down to your floor. Efficient. Don't rush the efficiency, cross. We just had breakfast. You started it with the lap sitting. I regret nothing. That, I think, was the moment I understood the whole shape of what had happened. That the pretending had never really been pretending at all, not on my end, and apparently not on hers either, and that the wedding, the rain, the barn, Derek's stiff handshake, had all just been the excuse 2 very careful, very scared people needed to finally say the thing they'd been circling for 2 years. I should back up, though, because I skipped over the part where Isla and I figured out, in real time, how to turn a 2-year friendship into an actual relationship without breaking the parts of us that already worked. It is a stranger transition than people admit. You don't get to start from zero. You start from 2 years of inside jokes, borrowed sweaters, a laundry room that had seen us both cry over unrelated things at different points, and a familiarity so total that the first time I actually, deliberately held her hand on a real date instead of a fake one, I felt like I was cheating on some earlier, simpler version of us. Our first official date happened 4 days after the wedding, which felt both absurdly fast and somehow like we were already embarrassingly late. I picked her up from her own apartment, which struck us both as ridiculous the second I knocked on a door I had a spare key to. This is insane, Isla said, opening the door in a soft yellow sundress, laughing before she'd even said hello. You have a key to this apartment, Jonah. I'm aware. I used it twice last week to feed your cat while you were at that conference. And now you're knocking like a stranger. I'm being a gentleman. Let me have this. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling the whole elevator ride down. And when I opened the truck door for her, the same truck she used to mock relentlessly for its cracked dashboard and permanent smell of mulch, she paused before getting in. You're really doing the whole thing, she said. Door open, flowers on the seat, reservation somewhere that isn't a taco truck. I contain more than one setting. I'm delighted to discover this. Dinner was at a small Italian place downtown. Candles on every table, the kind of low lighting that made everyone look slightly more mysterious than they actually were. Isla ordered for both of us with the calm authority of a woman who had memorized my preferences over 2 years of shared takeout orders. And somewhere between the breadbasket and the entrees, she reached across the table and laced her fingers through mine. No wedding excuse required this time. Can I tell you something slightly embarrassing? She asked. Always. I used to time my grocery runs around when I thought you'd be doing yours. So we'd run into each other in the hallway. I nearly choked on my water. You did not. I absolutely did. It worked probably 60% of the time. I got very good at reading your schedule. That's borderline surveillance. Isla, I said, shaking my head slightly. It's romantic surveillance. There's a difference. Is there? On me, yes. She sipped her wine, entirely unbothered by her own confession. Your turn. Confess something. I thought about it for a second, the candlelight flickering warm across her face, and decided the whole point of doing this for real was that I didn't have to hide behind a joke anymore. I kept every voicemail you ever left me, I admitted. Even the boring ones. Even the one where you just called to tell me you found a good parking spot. Something soft moved across her face. That's not embarrassing. That's just sweet. I told myself it was because I never got around to deleting things. It was not that. No, she agreed quietly. I don't think it was. We didn't kiss that night until she was back at her own door, key already in hand. And it was slower than the one at the wedding, less urgent, more like two people deciding, on purpose, in ordinary lighting, without rain or string lights or an audience, that this was something they wanted to keep choosing. The next several weeks unfolded in the specific, unglamorous way real relationships do. We learned each other's actual routines instead of the curated, neighborly versions we'd shown each other for 2 years. I learned Isla set 6 alarms every morning and used none of them correctly. She learned I talked to my houseplants the way some people talk to pets, mostly out of habit, occasionally out of genuine affection. We learned how to argue about small things without it becoming about something else entirely, a skill Isla treated with the seriousness of physical therapy, breaking every disagreement down into its actual component parts instead of letting old wounds bleed into new ones. About 2 months in, I met her mother properly, not as the neighbor who'd occasionally wave from across the parking lot, but as the man dating her only daughter, which came with an entirely different level of scrutiny. Renata sat me down at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't asked for and a directness that made it very clear where Isla got her efficiency. I liked you as her neighbor, Renata said. I like you more as this. But I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Not a polite one, not a rehearsed one, an honest one. Okay, are you going to be patient with her? Really patient, not performance patient. She spent 2 years with a man who made her feel like patience was something she had to earn. I will not watch her go through that again. I set my coffee down, met her eyes, and told her the truth. I've already spent 2 years being patient without her even knowing it, I said. I'm not going anywhere, Renata. I've had a lot of practice. Renata studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and satisfied. The exact same nod I'd later learn Isla gave when she'd made a decision and didn't feel the need to explain it twice. Good, she said. Then we're going to get along fine. Meeting my side of the family went about as smoothly as meeting Renata had, which is to say it was thorough, occasionally mortifying, and ultimately fine. My mother invited Isla to Sunday dinner 3 weeks after the wedding, and spent the better part of 2 hours pulling out photo albums I had specifically asked her not to touch, including one particularly damning image of me at age 11 wearing a homemade cape and insisting, to anyone who would listen, that I was going to be a superhero landscape architect who saved struggling gardens across the Tri-County area. Superhero landscape architect, Isla repeated, delighted, flipping to the next page before I could intervene. This explains so much about your personality. I was 11. I had ambitions. You still talk to your ferns like they're recovering patients. That's a completely different skill set. My father, a quiet man who rarely offered unsolicited opinions, pulled me aside near the end of the night while Isla helped my mother with dishes, laughing at something in the kitchen that I couldn't quite hear. "She's good for you," he said simply, drawing a glass with the kind of deliberate slowness that meant he was building up to something. "You've been steadier the last few months. I noticed it before your mother told me you two were official." "Steadier how?" "You used to talk about things you wanted to do. Now you talk about things you're actually doing them with." He set the glass down, looked at me directly. "That's the difference between wanting a life and building one, Jonah. Don't waste time getting there." I thought about that conversation a lot over the following months, mostly because it turned out to be true in ways I hadn't fully clocked until someone said it out loud. I had spent 2 years wanting a version of my life that included Isla in it properly, fully, without the careful distance we'd both maintained out of fear, and somewhere in the space of a single rainy wedding night, I'd finally started building it instead. We settled into a rhythm that felt less like the beginning of something fragile and more like the continuation of something that had always, quietly, been underway. Sunday mornings became sacred. Slightly burnt eggs, whichever newspaper section she wanted, both of us usually still in pajamas until well past noon. Wednesday nights became reserved for whatever terrible reality show currently had her attention, something I pretended to tolerate and secretly looked forward to more than I'd ever admit. We fought exactly the way she'd promised we would, out loud, without slammed doors, and made up exactly the way I'd hoped we would, with actual apologies instead of vague, deflecting jokes. There was one night, about 4 months in, that I think about more than almost any other, because it was the closest we came to actually breaking something before we'd even finished building it. Isla had a rough week at the clinic. A patient she'd worked with for months, someone recovering from a bad accident, had a setback that wasn't anyone's fault, but that she still carried home with her like it was. She showed up at my door at 9 that night, still in her scrubs, eyes red-rimmed, and instead of telling me what was wrong, she just said she was fine, 3 times, in 3 different tones, none of which sounded remotely fine. "Isla," I said, standing in my doorway, watching her hold herself together with visible effort. "You promised me. No disappearing behind competence." "I'm not disappearing. I'm standing right here. You know what I mean." She let out a breath that shook more than she probably wanted it to. "I had a bad day. I don't need it fixed. I don't need a solution. I just needed to not be alone in my own apartment tonight, and I didn't want to explain why." "Okay," I said, stepping back to let her in. "You don't have to explain anything. Come here." She came. We didn't talk about the patient that night. Not really. Not in any detail. She told me the basics eventually, quietly, curled into my side on the couch with a blanket she'd stolen from the back of my chair, and I didn't push for more than she offered. What surprised me was what happened the next morning, when she woke up before me, and I found her sitting at my kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee already poured, looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before, something like fear dressed up as calm. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to not make it a bigger deal than it is." "Okay." Last night, when I showed up here instead of going to my own apartment, that's not new. I do that. When things get bad, I go to the place that feels safest, and for 2 years, that place was your couch, platonically, and I never had to examine what that meant because we weren't dating. Now we are, and I looked at you standing in that doorway and felt this enormous relief, and it scared me, because Derek used to make me feel like needing him too much was a weakness he'd eventually get tired of. I sat down across from her, my coffee forgotten, my whole chest aching in that specific way it did whenever she let me see underneath the careful competence she wore like armor. "I'm not going to get tired of you needing me," I said slowly, choosing every word with the kind of precision she'd appreciate. "That's not a weakness, Isla. That's the actual point of this. I don't want the version of you that has it all handled alone. I've had 2 years of that version. I like this version better, the one who shows up at my door in scrubs and lets me make bad coffee and doesn't have to explain herself." Her eyes filled, and she pressed the heel of her hand against them like she could physically stop the tears from falling. I hate crying before 9 a.m. Duly noted for future reference. I mean it, Jonah. This is a whole new personality flaw you're discovering. I'll allow it. Once a week, maximum. She laughed, wet and unsteady, and reached across the table for my hand. I love you, she said, quiet and sudden, like it had simply slipped loose from wherever she'd been keeping it. I don't think I've said that yet. Out loud. In actual words. You have not, I confirmed, my own throat suddenly tight. I was starting to think you were saving it for a very specific occasion. I was saving it because I wanted to be sure. I'm sure. I love you too, I said. For the record, I've been sure since approximately the couch, 2 years ago, but I understand you needed the math to catch up. Don't be smug about this. I'm allowed one moment of smugness. I've been very patient. She laughed again, fuller this time, and came around the table to sit in my lap the way she had that first morning over eggs, and we stayed like that for a long time. Coffee going cold, the whole apartment quiet around us, both of us finally saying out loud the thing we'd apparently both known for months. That was the turning point, I think. Not the wedding, not the kiss under the string lights, not even the breakfast question that started the whole thing. It was that morning in scrubs and bad coffee, when Isla let herself need something out loud instead of just handling it alone, and I got to be the person she trusted enough to need. Derek tried calling her twice over the following months, not aggressively, nothing that crossed any legal line, just enough to remind her he still existed, still assumed some lingering claim on her attention. Both times, Isla declined the call without hesitation, and both times, she told me about it immediately afterward, unprompted, no performance of calm required. He wants to catch up, she said the second time, air quotes and everything, tossing her phone onto the counter like it had personally offended her. As though catching up is a thing people do after telling someone their career choices are unrealistic. Want me to call him back and explain, very slowly, why that's not happening? Tempting, but I think I've got it handled. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, something steady and unshaken in her posture that hadn't always been there a year ago. It's strange. I used to think getting over him would feel like some big dramatic moment. Turns out it mostly just feels like not caring what he thinks anymore, which is much less cinematic than I expected. Real growth rarely comes with a soundtrack, I said. I read that on a coffee mug once. Deeply profound coffee mug. I have excellent taste in ceramics. She laughed, crossing the kitchen to kiss me. Unhurried and easy. The kind of kiss that didn't need string lights or rain or a barn full of witnesses to mean something. Just a Tuesday. Just us. Exactly what I'd asked for over eggs in a mountain in 6 months earlier. There was a stretch, right around the 5-month mark, when Isla's work sent her to a 2-week continuing education intensive 2 states away, and I discovered exactly how much of my daily rhythm had rearranged itself around a person who wasn't even living in my apartment yet. I texted her more than either of us would probably admit publicly. She called during her lunch breaks, just to complain about a particularly humorless course instructor named Dr. Halvorsen, who apparently believed jokes had no place in continuing medical education, a philosophy Isla found personally offensive. He docked a point off someone's participation grade for laughing. She told me over video call one night, sprawled across a hotel bed in a city I'd never been to, hair damp from a shower, looking impossibly far away on my small phone screen. 1 point. For laughing. At a joke he made, by the way. He's punishing people for enjoying his own material. That's genuinely unhinged. I know. I've started a tally. There's a whiteboard in the break room. I am not proud of my contribution to that whiteboard, but I am also not sorry. Send a picture of the whiteboard. Absolutely not. It's evidence. I laughed, lying on my own bed 2 states away, feeling the specific ache of missing someone I used to only miss when they were on vacation, back before missing her came with an entirely different weight attached to it. I miss you, I said, before I could decide whether it was too much for a Tuesday. Isla went quiet for a second, her expression softening on the screen. I miss you too. It's strange. I used to travel for these things all the time before, and it never used to feel like anything except a break from routine. Now I keep reaching for my phone to tell you something, and then remembering you're not down the hall. We've ruined ourselves for casual distance. Completely ruined. I blame you entirely. I accept full responsibility. She smiled, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear, and for a second neither of us said anything. Just looked at each other through two cheap phone cameras, 300 miles apart. Both of us apparently fine with the silence because it didn't feel empty the way silences used to before any of this started. 9 more days, she said finally. I'm counting. You are not. I absolutely am. I have a calendar. It has a little countdown sticker on it. Don't tell anyone. Your secret is safe with me, she said, laughing, and it was such a small, ordinary conversation. And yet I hung up that night feeling more certain than I had at any point since the wedding that whatever this was between us, it wasn't going to be fragile. It wasn't going to need string lights or barns or dramatic gestures to survive. It was going to survive because it was built out of 9-day countdowns and complaints about humorless continuing education instructors and the particular, unglamorous comfort of knowing someone would still be there on the other end of an ordinary Tuesday call. She came home on a Friday evening, and I picked her up from the airport with a sign, entirely unnecessary given she knew exactly what I looked like, that red welcome home. Fiancé of the future, probably, which made her laugh so hard in the middle of the arrivals hall that a stranger asked if she was okay. I'm fine, she told the stranger, still laughing, wiping at her eyes. My boyfriend is just deeply embarrassing. Premeditated embarrassing, I clarified, folding the sign under one arm as I hugged her properly, feeling something in my chest finally settle after 2 weeks of missing her in a way that had genuinely surprised me with its intensity. I workshopped that sign for a full hour. An hour well spent, she murmured into my shoulder, not letting go. Take me home, Jonah. I have opinions about Dr. Halvorsen that require a couch and possibly wine. I have both of those things waiting. Marry me, she said, half joking, muffled against my jacket. Working on it, I said back, entirely serious, and felt her go still for half a second before she pulled back to look at me, something curious and hopeful flickering across her face, though neither of us said anything more about it that night. We just drove home, her hand on my knee the whole way, both of us quietly aware that the joke had landed a little too close to something real, and neither of us minding that in the slightest. By the time Naomi's 1-year anniversary rolled around, Isla and I were living together. Not officially, not with a signed lease or anything so formal, but in the quiet, accumulated way two people slide into a shared life when it's the natural next step and not a leap at all. My toothbrush lived at her place. Her running shoes lived at mine. We developed an entire private language of jokes about that first wedding, about Priya's $5 bet with Renata over how long it would take us to figure it out, about the specific eggs we still made every anniversary of that first breakfast, slightly burnt, on purpose now, a ritual instead of an accident. I proposed to the ring itself with the same careful precision Isla applied to everything else in her life, which meant a full 6 weeks of quiet planning, 3 false starts where I nearly asked her in far less romantic circumstances, including once in a grocery store parking lot, with a rotisserie chicken balanced on the hood of my truck, and one long conversation with Renata that ended with her handing me a small velvet box that had belonged to Isla's grandmother, insisting, with damp eyes, that some things deserve to come full circle. She's going to cry, Renata warned me. She cries at things she'd never admit she cries at. Don't let it throw you. I've had 2 years of practice reading her, Renata. I think I can handle happy tears. You'd better. If you mess this up, I will personally drive you into that lake she threatened to drive into before the wedding, and I will not feel 1 ounce of guilt about it afterward. Noted. High stakes. I'll be careful. Naomi invited us back to the same barn venue for the anniversary party, string lights up again, the same band playing a slower, sweeter set this time. Isla wore green again. Not the same dress, but close enough that I noticed. And when the band slid into a slow song near the end of the night, I pulled her onto the same patch of floor where I'd told her, a year earlier, that I'd had a lot of practice imagining exactly this. Deja vu, she murmured against my shoulder. A little on purpose, I admitted. She pulled back to look at me, something knowing in her expression. Jonah Cross, are you about to do something ridiculous in front of my entire family again? Depends what you'd classify as ridiculous. Her breath caught as I reached into my jacket pocket, and around us, the barn seemed to go quiet in that particular way rooms do when they sense something is about to happen. Renata's hand already flying to her mouth 3 tables over. Isla's father setting down his drink with suspicious speed, like he'd been waiting all night for exactly this. A year ago, I said, you asked me to pretend to be yours for one night. Best decision I ever agreed to on short notice. I'd like to formally, permanently, non-pretend ask you to make it real. For good. No expiration date. No wedding requirement. No ex-fiancé forcing our hand. Just us, choosing this, on purpose, forever. Isla was crying before I'd even gotten the ring out of my pocket, one hand pressed over her mouth, the other already reaching for me. Yes, she said, before I'd even finished asking, before I'd gotten down on one knee, before the ring had even fully caught the string lights above us. Yes, obviously, yes, you ridiculous, wonderful, patient man, yes. I laughed, kneeling properly despite her jumping the gun, sliding the ring onto her finger while half the barn erupted into applause, and Renata very audibly announced to the entire reception that she had always known, since the couch, since the 3rd floor, since the very beginning. You know, Isla said later, much later, after the toasts and the tears and her father shaking my hand with an actual smile this time instead of a warning grip. Both of us finally alone on the same porch swing where Naomi and her husband had shared their first dance a year earlier. I think about that morning a lot. The eggs. Asking what we were. Best question you ever asked me, I said, her hand warm in mine, ring catching the last of the fairy lights. Best answer you ever gave, she said back, and kissed me the way she had that very first time, slow and certain, no performance left in it at all. Just 2 people who had spent 2 years and 4 months pretending they didn't already know exactly what they wanted, finally, fully, done pretending for good. We got married the following spring, not at the barn, though we visited it once more for old times' sake, but at a smaller venue closer to home, with fewer string lights and considerably fewer surprises, since by then the entire extended Faraday family had spent 2 full years watching us build something real out of what had started as a favor. Renata cried through the entire ceremony, loudly and without apology. Priya, finally trustworthy with information, gave a toast that somehow managed to reference the original bet with a level of detail that suggested she'd been keeping careful notes the whole time. Derek was not invited, a fact Islam mentioned exactly once, in passing, with the specific lightness of someone for whom the absence no longer carried any weight at all. So that's the story. That's how one favor at a wedding, one desperate whispered request to pretend for a single night, turned into the rest of both of our lives. Sometimes the biggest thing you'll ever say to someone starts as the smallest, most practical request imaginable. Pretend you're mine, just for tonight. And somewhere between the string lights and the slightly burnt eggs, pretend quietly, permanently, stops being the operative word. What would you have done if your best friend asked you to pretend to be their date for one night, and then asked you what you actually were over breakfast the next morning? Have you ever had a fake relationship turn real, the way Jonah and Isla's did, starting as nothing more than a favor between 2 people too scared to admit what they actually wanted? If you've lived through something even remotely close to this, a pretend date, a wedding confession, a breakfast that changed everything, tell your story in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and honestly, some of your stories are better than the ones I write. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.